It's amazing to be alive at the point in time where we can understand those things for what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Here we can actually look at this stuff and understand, wow, that was an ammonite, that was a fossil creature, and we can see that, and we can watch that as that creature and its descendants evolved and changed, and now there's the modern equivalents are here. It's amazing. We're so lucky to, to have that window into deep time is absolutely incredible.
Welcome to our show brought to you by Geo Co. This show, we're all about connecting people to planet. And what we're going to hope to reveal to you is the secrets of the Earth that Earth scientists wish you knew. We're going to share with you how we view the world and how we connect with this beautiful planet of ours. Anthony, how are we?
Thanks, Holly. I'm great to be here. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. This has been the Geo Co is something that's been concocting in the back of my mind for a while because I've been just spilling out with love for the planet, not knowing where to put it. So I feel like I'm finally putting it somewhere with you.
Putting it to use.
For sure. For sure.
So, well, I mean, that's an important point. Scientists can often be seen as people who are a bit kind of remote or detached from the phenomena that they're observing, right? But we know that scientists are just people, right? And you have demonstrated up until now, especially that connection has been a big kind of part of your journey, connection with the landscape, connection with the planet, like you say. So, one of the most profound expressions of Earth, right, is when you're up in some mountains. When you are faced with that inescapable wall of rock, which obviously for geologists is very exciting. There's ice, there's other things.
It's a beautiful wall of rock.
There's this kind of experience of being completely absorbed and in nature in a way that perhaps meandering through kind of some sort of urban parkland is a different experience. It's not to say that it's not connected, but there's that immediacy of mountains. So, Holly, can you just give me an idea of one of your sort of peak mountain experiences?
Peak mountain experience at 22. I'm actually really fortunate to have been in plenty of mountains. I'm not a climber. I'm not an alpinist.
Sure.
I can't walk down the footpath without falling over. But I seem to have gotten myself in a couple of mountains. Most recently, I was in the New Zealand. In the Alps in New Zealand on the South Island. And that felt absolutely magical because I kind of felt scared. I thought the Earth is so alive here.
Yes.
The Earth is so alive here. The only thing permanent about this landscape is the fact that it's changing. So New Zealand was this absolutely magical experience backed by what I'd learned in geology about how plate tectonics is this dance of the Earth over billions of years. But, I actually think my most blissful mountain experience was in northeastern Arabia, in this beautiful country called Oman. And it's just an absolute collision of landscapes. We went from desert to coast to mountains to the bustling city of Muscat. And the mountains there, character is extraordinarily different from what I'd ever seen before, especially in South Australia.
Especially, sure.
That the colours made me feel really alive. The different vegetation made me feel absolutely alive. The wadis, which were these big canyons that big flash floods carve out over time, also felt alive. And so the takeaway with how beautiful I find mountains is that they're changing. They just make me feel like I'm a blip in this enormous expanse of time, which is the ultimate creator and destroyer of land. But I reckon you've got a cooler mountain experience than me.
I was saying cooler. It's just a different.
Himalayas trumps everything. I want to know about the Himalayas.
Oh my God, the Himalayas. Well, so the Himalayas it has all of the world, it's like 8 of the world's peaks above 8,000 meters or something. So it's the top, obviously. Everest, Chomolungma is up there. You've got K2. You've got all these other ones along that incredible mountain range. And of course, I'm not a climber as well. I'd much rather just trundle along the creek beds and kind of, I'm not really into big mountain climbing, I've got to say. but
there's geology to be had.
There's geology to be had. Let's go. Yeah. So I mean, as a younger man, I went to the Himalayas, and I climbed up. It's not really a climb. I was just walked up the valley. Up a couple of sort of lower kind of level hills, and you get a view out of the foothills, right? Indian foothills. You can see the kind of the morass and the kind of the melange of humanity. There's so many people down on the plains in front of you with this sort of pollution and smoke and cloud and whatever. And you just start to get above that, up into the mountains proper, and then you come across shepherds tending flocks of sheep just as they would have thousands or hundreds of years ago. and eventually even that slight sign of humanity disappears as you get it higher and higher into the Himalayas, and then eventually it just becomes rock. Rock and ice and snow, right? It's freshly fallen snow, and even the trees stay. It's
like a transcendence.
It is. It's like a transcendence. It's going way above, and then we got to the point where there's a pass. But it's like I'm just making this sound way better than it. It wasn't like a peak Himalayan climbing experience, but I just got to the first pass, right? And at the first pass, I could see that absolutely incredible scene, which is that wave upon wave upon wave of mountain peaks and ranges extending out as far as you can see to the north. Looking basically, so we're standing in northern Himalayas, Indian Himalayas, looking north towards Ladakh. And beyond that is the Tibetan Plateau, which itself has, numberless mountains and huge ranges and great big valleys and vistas and that could a peak experience, really, really drew me into really wanting to find out more about, geology and what is this thing, this earth? It looked alive. I love your point there. It is alive, and mountains do make the earth sciences come alive. That's for sure.
Totally. Even one of my favorite things to reflect on when especially when I was in Oman was looking at the mountains, knowing that the earth is a creator and destroyer. Like you sort of you can look at I was like, in some places you can literally slap the fault lines where you know that these sort of mountains are being uplifted, but by the same measure you're looking down and you see these big beautiful riverbeds where they're just being eroded away, and it's like you're caught in the middle of two time scales. And I always feel really lucky to just simply be alive and be caught in between that beauty.
Totally, yeah. Because as you say, at one point they're being pushed up. So there's this is the other thing is that huge force. I mean, when you pick up a rock and you hold it and you just think, that's pretty heavy, right? You just to lift a big rock up off the ground, it quickly becomes impossible for a small human. Especially weedy.
You know what? That's funny.
Weedy people like us.
Every time I go bushwalking with my family, I take an empty backpack, and my family goes, "Don't do it.
No, do it, Holly.
Don't do it, Holly.
No more samples.
No more samples." And I've got my backpack full. I'm carrying my rocks. My boyfriend's mad at me because he's carrying rocks. So yeah, heavy rocks make a strong lady. That's for sure.
There you go. It's how much force is required. How much force there is in the slow, inexorable motion of this dynamic earth, right? How much force is required just to lift up mountains. Of course, in the Himalayas or in Oman and New Zealand are great places where you see that really active, young process. Like I was saying, the other day in the Himalayas, you can see rocks which were like 15 or 20 kilometers. They've been brought up. We say they've been exhumed. They've been brought up from about 15 or 20 kilometers. 15 to 20 kilometers below the surface. They're now at the surface, and using our geological techniques, we can tell that it was only, say, 600,000, maybe 800,000 years ago that those rocks were at that incredible depth. So that's just tells you something about the rate of process that's going on in a place as active as the Himalayas, and certainly, in New Zealand as well, where the rate of erosion is actually helping. The fact that it's being eroded so quickly is helping it pop up,
And 600,000 years, were humans around at that point?
Humans were around that. Modern humanity is a roughly at that scale, maybe 600,000 to 1 million years of the modern humans. Obviously, we had, what do you call, like the species which were morphologically similar prior to that, and the last sort of, I guess, humanity's been evolving for the last 8 million years or so. But you would have modern humans around at a time when these rocks were 15 kilometers below the earth. So, I mean, it's the thing. When you look at a stream running down from New Zealand or the Himalayas, there's a lot of boulders, right? There's always big boulders. Oh, that was amazing, right? But for the most part, those streams just seem to just trickle away, and you get little, bits of sand. But if you were to trace one piece of sand, how long does it take that piece of sand to break off a granite and then make its way all the way down, an Indian river into the Ganges and eventually ending up down in the Bay of Bengal? The amount of time it requires. But the fact that this thing is only 600, say 800,000 years old, and we've eroded away in that spot at least 15 kilometres worth of rock.
15 Ks.
15 kilometres worth of rock at least has gone from where those things are now. So they've been brought up for 15 kilometres depth and pushed up.
The Earth did all that work.
The Earth is exactly. The Earth is.
Poor thing.
That's a lot of work, right? And this is one of those unique places in global geology. I'm talking specifically about the eastern Himalayan region, and it's the place where you can see the Himalayas sort of bend around from a more of sort of I guess it's an west northwest trend in Nepal and Mount Everest, and as you go around towards the northern part of Assam and that state in northern India and Bangladesh, it sort of bends around down towards Myanmar.
Is this something you could see on Google Earth?
Oh, it's absolutely. You can absolutely see the trace of this mountain range in the Google Earth. I mean, there's an equivalent shape out in the Pakistan regions as well. So there's this kind of shape to the Himalayas. Anyway, the point is, it's unbelievably dynamic, right? And I think it's one thing, for us city dwellers to kind of think, there's occasionally a little bit of a flood and somebody's backyard fills up with water or something, right? I mean, I guess especially for us South Australian city dwellers, that's a rare occurrence. Of course, other cities they get more rainfall than us, but these sort of water processes are generally thought of as pretty slow. But actually, in the right place with the right amount of water, and especially with ice, right? Ice is the great destroyer, especially glaciers, right? Because they just have you seen glacial moraines in New Zealand?
We did. We saw a couple, and you just go, "How did you get there?
Yeah.
You suspicious thing! You suspicious thing!" Ice is the absolute carver of mountains.
It carves them away. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So especially, and then if you go back, and through the glacial cycles, and we know we've had them, at quite short intervals, maybe 10,000 years ago, 10 to 15 to 20,000 years ago, the Earth was in a much colder cycle than it is now, and so there were much more widespread ice caps, and even down in Tasmania, of course, we had ice caps down there. But New Zealand and the Himalayas most certainly were absolutely covered in ice, even 10, 15,000 years ago. And and we know in North America as well, like you would have seen in Canada, there's so much glacial moraines and glacial material that northern ice sheet there would have been no Canada. It was all under ice, more or less. Right?
And you can and something that I've loved deeply about a journey into geology is that it's less about sort of the facts and figures that you learn in a class. And what's been more special is, like you said, I was in Canada last year, and it's actually sitting down and, just having a moment of quiet with yourself and looking around at the immediate landscape around you and going, why? Why does it look like this? How did it get here? And that single question, and in that single question, you can time travel. You absolutely transport yourself into not decades, not centuries, but millions of years of an Earth carving itself in a process that humans had nothing to do with. And you've got the pleasure of sitting there and knowing that you're amongst something so much bigger than yourself. And the Earth's forces are so much bigger than you and more powerful than you can imagine. And that in particular, Canada, the glacial landscapes were just...
It's phenomenal, isn't it?
Unbelievable.
It's phenomenal. I mean, to picture a whole well, I guess the remnant of that ice sheet still exists, of course, up in the Arctic and Greenland, of course, and things like that. But to picture that whole landscape in Europe, likewise, would have largely been covered by for large regions of Europe would have been covered in ice sheet, and our ancestors wandered up against that ice sheet, and totally. would have cursed the northerly winds that are coming off it. I'm sure.
Would this be right to say that even some time in the Flinders Ranges, there's evidence for the Flinders Ranges once having icebergs bobbing up and around the place, and that's just crazy. The South Australian outback is as red and dusty as outbacks come.
It's Mars, really.
And then you look around and you see some rocks with some smaller rocks in them, and you go, now that if I thought something was suspicious before, now I think it really is. And icebergs leave their traces.
Telltale signs, absolutely. Yeah. Sure. I mean, then I guess that goes back to the multiple cycles of glacial events happening, through time. So, and glaciers obviously are controlled in a large part by climate, right? So, the changing climatic environment really controls the extent, the shrinking and the enlarging and shrinking of those glacial sheets is a large part controlled by climate. So, yeah, that's a connection to a deep time. That like you say, you sit there and you'll see one of those boulders. I remember walking down the street in Vancouver one time, and there was It was some bank or some nondescript,
Yeah.
big high-rise building. But out the front, they had a little water feature, and in the water feature was this boulder, right? And I looked at that boulder and I thought, it just looks like a boulder, but I just went up close to it and I could see that, the little striations.
Yeah.
So little grooves on the outside of a boulder which can only be formed through the action of ice.
Mm-hmm.
So the boulder is being sort of dragged along at the base of a glacier, sitting on top of it, and the boulder's down the bottom, and it's being pushed along like a bulldozer pushing something. And as it tumbles and turns, you get these grooves carved into it. So I remember just standing there in downtown Vancouver going, oh, man,
that's not bad.
That's a glacial erratic. How cool is that? I mean, and we get them, like you say here, we get them down at Hallett Cove and places like that where you see evidence of past glaciers. The Earth is unbelievably dynamic, unbelievably dynamic.
Well, I've got this question. When you're in the Himalayas, is it true that you find fossils among the Himalayan mountains?
Yeah, well, yes.
And what are they doing up there?
What are they?
What business?
There's a limestone on top of Mount Everest.
And limestones, just in case we're not sure, are typically rocks that form under the ocean.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so rocks that formed under the ocean are now forming the highest peaks on the planet.
Sitting right in the top. If you climb up the South Col, the Hillary Step into and you're in the death zone.
When Anthony was hiking the summit of Mount Everest.
So I'm told. You're stepping into you can actually see these fantastic photos. You can see the yellow band, they call it, right? And that's when you get into the limestone. There's these kind of series of different layers as you go up the mountain and get into this limestone. And I only found out, maybe I knew it before, but I found out again more recently that limestone is 450 million years old, sitting on top of Mount Everest. So 450 million years ago, and that's a long time. Like 800, I was talking 800,000 before. That's peanuts.
Yeah.
This is 450 million.
Mm-hmm.
That's a much longer time. But the point is that rock formed probably by just sort of the slow settling out of shells and shelly fossils into some sort of quiet, maybe medium to shallow depth ocean. And these sort of all the fossils are their little shells. It's not like not exactly like you get down to the beach now, but similar. Close enough, and you get, so that's partly what's formed these limestones, and so you can see fossils and things like that in these rocks. And it's just, I mean, and that, that whole idea of the rocks themselves show us the progression and the evolution of life is so amazing as well. Himalayas are full of it, but there's plenty of other places. Have you seen some good fossil localities in your travels? Where are you thinking of fossils?
Honestly, not to keep going on about my new favorite country, Oman, but that's honestly probably most recently where I saw them was these fossiliferous.
What did you say? Limestones?
Yeah, lots of limestones, lots of carbonates. But my favorite, and I know it's in my backyard, and everyone who knows me knows that all I talk about is the Flinders. But truly, my favorite sort of way to talk about fossils is in the Neoproterozoic rocks, and in sort of, well, not the Neoproterozoic rocks, the Cambrian rocks in the Flinders Ranges, and how we've got these like beautiful, the first little inklings of multicellular life.
I know.
Popping up in what are the rocks of the Flinders Ranges. And it's even funnier now working in the minerals industry when you hear people talk about the cover sequences over ore deposits.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, what you're saying by cover sequence, it's just a cute little, do you mean the first multicellular life on Earth?
How dare you dismiss that?
The disrespect that is being shown to these absolutely remarkable artifacts of the first life on the only planet that we know to host life. You will not call that cover sequence. You will call that with the respect that it deserves. And so even though I actually haven't in person seen a ridiculous amount of like really impressive fossils, I sort of I feel the sentiment of life recorded in rocks. As I just like thinking about that.
Absolutely.
But even I always get a bit funny because I tried taking biology in uni. I wasn't very good at it. I didn't try that hard, but I much preferred geology.
There's something that couldn't run away.
Yeah, exactly. You're trapped now. You're in my backpack. Can't do that with living things, apparently.
Yeah.
But when we talk about the origins of life, I always hear biologists talking about it. But then sort of when you start learning about geology, you go, geology is a study of this Earth. The Earth the Earth in the beginning, it was dust, and then it was magma, and then it was rocks, and life sort of sprung from the same elements that constitutes the solid material of the Earth, and fossils are my geology way of connecting with a subject I was never very good at.
The imprints of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it is that's beautifully explained. And I guess that's why we talk about things like the spheres, So you have the atmosphere, which explains the kind of gaseous material around the Earth, and we have the hydrosphere with water, and then ice comes into that as well. But then you have the biosphere, okay? And I love the way you say that. It's all come from the same, I guess, ingredients, right? So the whole biosphere and the evolution of life. I mean, and it's just fascinating to think that there were, for thousands and thousands of years, people have stumbled across these limestones in Arabia or, probably in the Himalayas, and certainly in classic fossil localities like in Europe and so on, and in the UK and where people have seen, those big ammonite shells. There's some of them are huge. They're like tires, huge. Huge things just kept popping out of the Jurassic Coast in England. I mean, it's astonishing, but it's amazing to be alive at the point in time where we can understand those things for what they are, as opposed to maybe what we imagine they might have been, which is fine. I'm not disputing or putting down any other alternative ways of looking at things. That's totally fine. But here we can actually look at this stuff and understand, wow, that was an ammonite, that was a fossil creature, and we can see that, and we can watch that as that creature and its descendants evolved and changed, and now there's the modern equivalents are here. It's amazing. We're so lucky to, to have that window into deep time is absolutely incredible.
And deep time is definitely sort of, if I think back, what makes me feel so in love, so connected with the natural world. It's always coming back to the concept of deep time. Like locating yourself in the landscape is just sort of an extension of locating yourself in an extraordinarily vast expanse of time. Like when I was a kid, my first love was astronomy, and I used to sort of lie down. I was usually camping and look up at the night sky, and I'd always imagine that I wasn't looking up at the night sky. I was actually looking down into the universe, and the only thing keeping me attached to the Earth was gravity, and that was how I located myself in something bigger than Holly. I felt like I grew up on the books and documentaries that told me that the iron in your blood was forged in stars. All the elements that make up anything that we call nature, and that anything that we like to build our technology with actually came from something so intrinsically beautiful, came from the cosmos, and now exists on an Earth that has been forged by these massive cosmic processes.
Cosmic scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The first way I orientated myself with a bit of purpose was in the universe. And the last few years, it's definitely easier and more tangible to locate yourself within an Earth history. And it's the only kind of reminder of peace. It's like it really serves to center me in a life that gets stressful and it gets busy, and you're walking down city streets and all you see is cars and buildings, and you go, what does any of this mean? You just have to go camping for a couple of days and remind yourself that nature is a beautiful old thing, and there exists a world that you can tap into right on demand. She will be there. She's always been there, and she will be there long after we have gone. Way long after humankind is gone. The Earth will come back to equilibrium.
Its own equilibrium.
Yeah.
That's right. We've got the beginnings there of some really interesting topics that I'd love to explore, and I'd actually, you and I have kind of talked a little bit, and dabbled in kind of some social media side of stuff, and we sometimes pretend that we're doing communication, right?
We call ourselves communicators, yeah.
I don't necessarily call myself a communicator.
I do.
I'm just saying, we talk about, and I guess scientists in general are always, perhaps in the past, it was okay for a scientist to just be a scientist and talk to other scientists, publish papers, talk in strange jargon, and that was fine because there was a level of acceptance of speciality that doesn't exist necessarily now, right? Now, I think scientists are really being challenged to peel back some of that, peel away some of that kind of take the lab coat off, I should say. I mean,
Take the lab coat.
I don't know
off
if
and
you
enter the
own a
world.
lab coat.
No, I've never owned a lab coat. Like I said, bio didn't go so well for me, represented in the fact I didn't ever own a lab coat. Traded lab coat in for a pair of hiking pants.
Hiking boot.
But now it's time to trade that in for actually a bit of storytelling.
The storytelling.
Yeah.
So I guess, this is a challenge for us, and especially, I would challenge you directly. Like, let's, what do you say we just sort of create something out of some of these themes and see if we can, let's see if we can bring some of that wonder, which we obviously and deeply feel, to some of these topics so that, we can share some of that with people out there.
Yeah, I'd love that because, I often think earth science can be a wonderful technical discipline, but it actually frames the entire way that I now live my life. The entire way that I engage with the planet is framed by this earth science perspective. And it's just mission critical of this discipline to share that beauty, to share that perspective. It's, the domain of science actually should really belong to everyone. And for too long it's been insular. And so I guess by necessity it has to be, right? So in order to deeply understand something, of course you have to develop jargon. Of course you have to develop a specialized language for something. That's how human knowledge systems have always evolved. But then you have to unwrap it.
Thank you. You do. You've wrapped it up neatly. We've categorized it, put it. I could just picture the books of library shelves, like the old days of pulling out the catalogue and flicking through the things, and that things are organised and catalogued. And it's not enough to store them in the great library of Adelaide University or wherever, the great libraries of the world. It's time to take that. That sounds terrible. So take it to the people, right?
I love it. No,
you know
I
what
love
I mean,
it.
right? It's time for us to be available. If people want to know some stuff and they've got some ideas, get in touch. We can. Maybe there's opportunities there. We can collaborate with people or whatever. I'd love to bring in some other people as well, some real experts in these things. I mean, we talk about the Himalayas.
There's plenty of people actually don't know a whole lot more
than we do. Absolutely. So let's see where we can go with this and take it, and have some fun with some of these, topics of wonder.
Yeah, have some fun with Geo Co.
Thanks, Holly.
Thanks, Anthony.
Great to talk.